Hello, everyone. This is Kris from Movement Mortgage.
And I'm Sam St. Louis with Allied Realty Group, here to tell you about what's going on in the market this week.
Thanks so much for joining us. What a market, what a roller coaster market it's been the last couple days here.
Yes, I would agree.
So just a couple updates on the market here. A week or two ago, we saw interest rates hit the lowest that it possibly could. Well, it kind of got a knee-jerk reaction a little bit last week with what's going on overseas here. Right now, we're in the middle of March here. So let me kind of read you these headlines here, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So with big global events happen, the market, they don't always act the way we expect them to. Normally, investors, they're going to move their money into safer places when we see conflicts happen overseas. They move to safer places, which would be the bond market, which would be the interest rate market. We like that because, in essence, technically, then the interest rates will go a little bit less. Again, lower rates, good. But right now, the impact of the rising oil prices and inflation with what's happening overseas, the inflation is stronger than usual. So then in essence, we're not seeing that safe haven effect. And again, with what happened overseas, we saw a knee-jerk reaction. So the rates kind of ticked up just a little bit. But right now I'm kind of watching the last couple of days. Hopefully we're going to see them settle down a little bit more. I think what matters most is you need to think about there's two things that you can watch as far as for what's going to happen with the short-term interest rates. Are they going to settle down at all? Here's the thing. If what's happening overseas, if it drags on, we may see higher rates stick around a little bit. Watch your oil prices for two things to watch. Watch the oil prices. And again, how long this conflict will last. The longer it lasts, we possibly could see the rates kind of hang up a little bit higher, stick up a little bit higher. But again, that remains to be seen.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, because I think that's the biggest question. I mean, honestly, besides what's going on with the market, that's the biggest thing I think, and I can speak for a good portion of agents. That's what we get asked is, what's going on with the interest rates? I have no business speaking on interest rates, so I will point them right to you. But yes, I would say that that's probably a big portion of the at least the first round of questions that we get asked.
Well, you figure interest rates impact your payments, therefore affects affordability. So is it going to allow you to buy that $300,000 house, or can you buy the $325,000 or $340,000 house? And we all know the difference between those two is quite a bit.
Right. And even like payment wise, I mean, rough guesstimating, are we talking huge? I mean, because I think it can be said, like at least with the market today, the difference between a $300,000 house and a $340,000 house, I would have to agree in Dodge County. I think that's a pretty significant, you're going to see a lot of significant differences. I mean, I'm not saying a $300,000 house is a piece of junk, of course not, but payment wise, does it really make that significant of a difference?
Well, let's take a look. So if we take a look at a $350,000 house over a 30-year time period, and let's just say, if we do 6.5, that payment is $2,212 just for principal and interest. Sure. And then if we say it goes to 6%, that payment goes to $2,098. Okay. So every little bit helps.
Oh, yeah.
Now, keep in mind interest rates. They can adjust accordingly. They can adjust as far as for, rates are determined as far as what your credit score is, how much down payment you have, what your loan program is. So again, we always got to be careful as far as when we quote interest rates. But I mean, in essence, this is for this example. It just is kind of determined as far as what the difference in payment could be.
Sure. Yeah. Which it's crazy. It really is how much, difference really, and when I always felt that was the biggest thing that misconception that I didn't understand was when I looked at when I got our tax form that, with you write off the interest or whatever on your house, whatever you paid. And I said, how is it we've been living here this long and we've only paid this much money off to it? Like, I mean, there's so much on your end of things that is there's so much that entails on your end of things that it's like, yeah.
The lovely amateurization. They start out high interest and low on principal, and then it just kind of makes that shift over time that, the longer it goes, the more you pay on principal and less on interest. But man, those first couple of years, you have to be really careful.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, it's industry standard. Everybody's in that same
Yeah.
pooling of that. So
Yeah. Yes. Very, very good to be educated on that. And I think that's really important as well. If me personally, I don't work with, or I haven't thus far, I should say, work with a ton of first time home buyers, but that seems to be where the education is lacking. And I'm not saying that I'm not educating them, but someone like you you're explaining it the way you're breaking it down, I think that's key. So I think that they should, when looking for a home, I mean, I think starting with you or a lender is key, like starting with you rather than starting with me. You know what I mean? Because
absolutely, because you take a look at what price range do we want to look in, which is one of the most important things you need to know, other than location of it. Are we talking 250? Are we talking 300? Or can we go 350 or higher, or maybe 400?
yeah, yeah, because I mean anyone, I mean, yeah, because we can absolutely go and look at $400,000 homes, but then when you go to get your pre-approval, and we're only looking at 250, I mean, yeah, we got a little bit of a problem there. So I think understanding on your side of things is, I mean, start with the numbers first. I would definitely advise any of my clients, just
And,
because.
I always like to say it's like, I stay in my lane. I don't talk about value. That's your job. And, kind of more or less you're saying, hey, Kris, interest rate is on my side of things. So typically what I'll usually do for a buyer in whatever price range that they're looking at, we'll take a look at what's it listed at. And then again, we'll work with you as a real estate agent, figure out, okay, are we going to have to come in at a higher amount? How does that impact the payment?
Right.
A good rule of thumb is for every $1,000 in price, you're looking at anywhere from $5 to $7 a month in payment.
Sure.
So you're like, that's maybe one less stop at your favorite coffee shop or treats at a gas station. But over, a period of time, over an amount, it can add up after a while.
Yeah, my broker has, he sold our house. That's when I first met him. And it was funny because he did when he was explaining to us, I mean, we were selling, and when we were buying, we didn't have a real estate agent on the buying end. It was, and he did, I thought it was funny. He used for a reference when we were talking payments, just, him just educating us. He goes, I really enjoy drinking rock stars, and if I guess if I don't want to have to spend this amount of money, I guess I'm not drinking rock stars. And I thought, what? Like, well, it didn't make sense to me. And he was like, yeah, like that's how you have to look at it. If you want to have a more expensive home, you have to see where you can cut your, you gotta budget. And it's like, oh, okay. And then you don't think about it until you're like, yeah, I really do buy like 2 Red Bulls like 3 times a week. What? Okay. So there's essentially, yes, a couple $1,000 for your house payment.
Let's go a little bit deeper on that, because I think the audience maybe aren't aware of it. It's the creep factor, we call it, right?
Yep.
It's, do you go to the coffee shop? Do you go to the gas station to get, your favorite drink? Because you figure, what is your average spend on that? Is it anywhere from, $5, $6, or is it 13 or 14, depending upon what you get? Well, you take a look at that over a period of time. And let's say you do that, 4 times a week. And let's say on average, it's 13 times. And then let's see here once, that's $52 a week right there. And then again, at 4 weeks or whatever, that's $208. So then over a year, you're looking at $24.96. So again, $2,500, just on treats. Now, here's the thing. I'm not going to be all phooey on you and say you can't do it. I think, what? I think it's just causing that awareness, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Because you aren't aware of it until somebody, explains it to you or uses that, that analogy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's interesting. It really is. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about how the market's doing. We're not quite in a buyer's market yet, right? Or still in the seller's market, or what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I would think I would definitely say that we're in a seller's market. But the one thing that I will kind of bring to the attention is so there's people still buying. We're still, we're seeing the inventory move. However, our buyers are a lot more strategic. So I mean, me personally, I like to go into it with a strategy. They are going to be more kind of picky, I guess, for lack of a better term. We're looking for what is updated. I mean, do we have at least, is the roof newer or did it have newer windows, like one or the other? They're just going to be more kind of strategic on what they're looking for and when they're buying, which I think is a good thing because, I mean, as we've seen over the years, it's kind of, shifted back and forth. But I think it's definitely a seller's market. Just the buyers are being more kind of strategic with how they're hunting, if you will.
I love that word. And when you talk about strategic, it's really, there are many factors involved as far as, how long the house has been on the market, how well it's priced. And that's something you, as an agent, that you can really counsel the buyers on that and come up with a good plan of action.
Yes, absolutely. Because if you miss that, the big thing, I guess me personally, that I have taken in, if you miss that mark, it's downhill from there. It really is. I definitely, my goal is always to get my seller. We want to net them the most amount of money and get them the best deal we can. Same on the buyer's end as well. We want to get them the best home and the best, what works for them and their family. And yeah, we definitely want to push the envelope. And do you think we could list it for this? And what I have learned and, been taught thus far is if you miss that mark, you miss a whole pool of buyers. So it's very, very, the pricing is very important. Again, strategy is like key, the word.
And I think too, you take a look at knowing your numbers ahead of time, what you can afford. So if the house is listed here, okay, and if you offer here, what this price range is versus what you offer here. And I know I like to use my hands a lot, so don't mind me.
Same.
It gives a good visual effect, right?
Yeah.
So then obviously taking a look at everything that the house has with regards to, where the better pricing is on that.
Yes. I agree. We just knowing what you have. And, that's the thing as well. Many homeowners, they're proud of what they've done. We've updated, the cheapest thing that adds the most amount of value that you can do to your home is paint. At the end of the day, paint will give you the biggest bang for your buck. Now, not to get that confused with if we paint and we put new flooring in, that doesn't mean that we can charge $50,000 more. We have to go with what the market's telling us. We have to see what's selling around us. Everything has a specific point to it. So, like I said, the market doesn't care that we have new carpeting and new paint on our walls and new siding. They care that our neighbor across the street sold their house for $20,000 more. So that's our biggest misconception thus far.
That's interesting that you say that because, in some cases, some buyers, they just want to move in. They don't want to do any work at all.
Right.
For other buyers, they're like, you know what, leave it as it is. I'll take care of it.
Yes.
They have the means to do that. So,
right. Which, to your point, circling back to what you had said before. So if the buyers are like, you know what, we don't want to do anything. We're in a position, we're into that, like maybe move up home. This isn't our first home, but it's not our forever home. Okay, we don't want to do anything. Okay, that's great. Then that's what we're looking for. That's the strategy we're going with. And your lender said, you have this budget, we have this pre-approval, and that's kind of the strategy we go with.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So to sum it all up, strategy.
Yes.
We want to watch kind of what's going on overseas. Obviously, the two things that I talked about earlier today to watch out for is watch your oil prices and then how long the conflict overseas will last. If we see the conflict lasting for some time, we're probably going to see interest rates start to maybe tick up a little bit more. We're not seeing that they're going to decrease at all, but if we get some favorable results, I don't even know what to use for term on that. But again, if the conflict is resolved, then hopefully we'll be back on the track of where the interest rates will be on a downward trend. And then definitely for sure, Sam, you can kind of comment on this, that in essence, if the rates go down, we might be seeing a little pressure on the market as far as for listings selling faster. So if you wanted to chat about that.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I would agree. I think that when that pressure kind of gets put, it's, it is a very exciting time, I will say, because, you have an open house and you have two offers in your hand before the open house is over, but also that does create a little bit of a challenge, especially with when we're talking in our first time home buyers, because a lot of times when we're going out looking, if you give them a pre-approval for 275,000 and we're looking at homes for between 250 and 275, a lot of the time we're at the top end of our budget and we say, Kris, we got 275 and I think that we're going to be in a multiple offer. And what happens then? You're not magic. You can't just give us more money. So I think that's where we get the strategy in with our buyers, is being prepared for that time when the pressure really gets going. So I think that it's very exciting on the seller end, but it's also, it gets nerve wracking on the buyer end. So if you're definitely looking well under your budget, which some people do, then it is a little bit easier. So, yeah.
It brings our word of the day strategic.
Yes.
If that market does happen, myself as a loan officer, we really need to take a look at what other options does the customer have to be able to compete in this market. One option would be a buy down, or we can take a look at, getting the interest rate down there in the beginning, either a permanent or temporary. I don't want to bore you on the details on that, but there are ways we could take a look at that we've used in the past to help buyers get into homes and still make it affordable for them.
Yeah, absolutely. This was actually a question I got asked by a buyer. So because they had heard you can do, so you look at their debts, I'm just bear with me. I'm trying to reiterate your part of the job, my lane I'm not supposed to be in, but you can add, like, say they only owed this much left on their vehicle and you're like, okay, you can pay that vehicle off to make their debt right. Like, what lane I'm going in here, where I'm going.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So how would something like that kind of go?
So when each customer is a little bit different on as far as their income, their debt. So we can take a look at, do we want to pay off some debt to help them qualify for maybe a little bit more? Do they have the capacity to do that? Another way is, in essence, we can take a look at an interest rate buy down. Mm-hmm. And there's the permanent buy down, and there's also the temporary buy down. Permanent buy down, it's pretty simple. So let's say if the market is coming in at 6.3, can we buy the interest rate down permanently to 5.75 or whatever that magic number is for them? And then that would be the rate for the life of the loan. And that's fixed rate. So you have to determine, what are the costs in that? So there's going to be some upfront costs on that. And here's the thing, every day is a little bit different.
Yeah.
Meaning, depending upon what the market is doing at that moment in time.
Okay.
So again, that would be your permanent buy down.
Yeah. Which is kind of cool. I mean, that's something that I don't talk about that every day. That's something that's kind of newer to me. So, but again, starting with you in the beginning of the process, that it's very good to know something like that. You get to talk the numbers and then say, if there are options for, moving numbers around or moving money around, there's so much. I feel like you could probably go on for days about what.
And with that too, the other option would be a temporary buy down. Now, with that, the popular option would be like a 2-1 buy down. You're like, 2-1 what?
Yeah.
So if the market is at, let's just say 6.375, a 2-1 buy down would, in essence, you would have a start rate of 4.375. That's fixed for 12 months. And then on the 13th month, it goes to 5.375 for 12 months. And then here on out, then it will go to 6.375.
Okay.
So there's some costs associated with that as well too. But I mean, it kind of lessens the immediate knee jerk. Ooh,
Sure.
The bigger payment right away.
The shocker of, that's on our first home. We had a ARM loan, the 5-year one, and which is very confusing, honestly, because it's like, oh my gosh, in 5 years, do we have to refinance? Like, how do we have to do this process over? And so obviously we were explained that, but the guy said, depending, the interest rates in 5 years. If you look at just this past 5 years, if you look at today as to what my interest rate was, 5 years ago when we purchased, or back in that time, the guy said, just beware. He goes, you don't have to refinance. You don't got to do anything like that. But the payment is probably going to shock you, because it is going to go from, you have to match the market. So back then it wasn't too severe, but still it's, that's something that you have to ask. And if you don't know the questions to ask, you're not going to know until,
I think it's important as far as for, whoever you're dealing with on the financing side of things, as far as, know what the terms are, know what the costs are, and then take a look at, working with you as a real estate agent. Okay, where do we need to kind of come in at this house to get the house that we want? So again, strategic.
Yes. Going in with a strategy. And that is key. And it's nice when you can when we all can work together as a team. We're in it for the same reason, and we're all going for the same results. So
yeah. And at the end of the day, I had another customer says, I want to start with this, but I'm really, really nervous. And at the end of the day, it's okay, because we're talking thousands of dollars here. We're not buying a candy bar at the gas station. Should I or shouldn't buy that candy bar? Yeah. So I think, setting up a private consultation with myself, and then in essence, private consultation with Sam, and talking about as far as the market and, what it looks like within your own price range. And again, we can kind of take a look at what is all out there. So don't be afraid to ask questions. That's how you can possibly move up or move down in a home, or get that first house.
Okay, so that was extremely informational. I think that I definitely took away something today, for our couple-minute conversation here.
This is Kris Weniger from Movement Mortgage.
And Sam St. Louis with Allied Realty Group. Thanks.